Hai, Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Welcome to Kita Family Podcast episod yang ke-8. Di Kita Family, kami membincangkan perihal tentang hidup bermasyarakat, hidup secara inklusif, menghargai kepelbagaian dan keunikan sesama kita dari segi agama, bangsa, rupa dan juga keupayaan. So kami di sini kerana kami hendak meningkatkan kesedaran untuk hidup dalam masyarakat yang berbagai-bagai, so diversity, dan juga untuk menjadi lebih inklusif. Pada hari ini kita akan membincangkan beberapa perkara, tetapi bila episod ini akan tersiar, kita akan menyambut World Down Syndrome Day. Yes.
Cantik
So that's
tak?
why.
Cantik tak stocking kita?
Kenapa kita semua pakai stokin macam ni ya? So anyway, this is a worldwide campaign. Dah agak lama juga yang memang sangat dikaitkan dengan World Down Syndrome Day. Nama dia Lots of Socks atau Crazy Socks. So memang pada hari ini kita memakai stokin yang menarik dan bertukar ganti dan disengajakan lah to celebrate diversity sebenarnya, to celebrate kepelbagaian ya. So if I can say a little bit about Down syndrome. Down syndrome adalah satu genetic and developmental condition yang basically kalau secara just the most basic thing is that it's a person that's born with an extra chromosome. So our chromosome semua comes in pairs sebagai manusia. So trisomy 21 secara technical is what Down syndrome most commonly is amongst those with DS, and it means that instead of having the pair, ada one extra chromosome. Dan bila ini berlaku, individu yang terkesan akan mempunyai kepelbagaian dari segi fizikal dan juga intelektual dan berbeza-beza juga. So it depends, but it's a combination of neurodivergence dan juga ciri-ciri fizikal yang akan terlihat bagi setiap individu yang menerima diagnosis Down syndrome. And also because it is very clearly genetic and melibatkan physical aspects, Down syndrome ni kerap kali boleh dikesan dari hari lahir. From birth, it's something that you can check. So for example, when babies are born, dalam klinik ke dekat hospital setting, one of the first things that kita kan check is this thing called the APGAR score, which is untuk melihat ciri-ciri kepada bayi yang baru lahir. Antaranya kita akan lihat di belakang tengkuk leher, kita akan lihat posisi kedukan mata. There's a few different things, and that score will determine whether this is a typical baby that is healthy without any issues, ataupun dalam keadaan diagnosis Down syndrome, kita akan mula melihat ciri-ciri fizikal that will affect the APGAR score. But anyway, that's just a little bit about it. And so Hari Down Syndrome Sedunia adalah officially 21 hari bulan Mac pada setiap tahun. And today it's this year 2024. Temanya, I think it's a really great theme. So I would like to ask each of you to talk about the theme, because it ties in so well also when we talk about neurodiversity secara umum ya. The theme for World Down Syndrome Day 2024 is End the Stereotypes. So tamatkan stereotype. Kita tak nak lagi stereotype ya. So I would love to hear your thoughts, ladies, on stereotypes, on maybe some experiences with Down syndrome, or anything that you'd like to share in connection to neurodivergence and inclusion. Can we start off with Kakak SK?
Yeah, apa khabar semua? SK here. And Nori, kami semua mau ingatkan ibu bapa ini early intervention ni. Sebenarnya as you were describing the Down syndrome, dalam pregnancy dari minggu 10 sampai 14, this is even before anak tu lahir, Down syndrome, ibu boleh dapat medical check ya, amniocentesis, dan ada beberapa attribute lah, especially buat masa sekarang, ramai yang mungkin berkahwin lewat sedikit. Like myself, sudah lebih dari 30 tahun, the mum can get a screening, and we call this an amniocentesis lah. So in the interest and spirit of early detection, some families do regularly, or even at KKM, I believe, or in private hospital, we highly suggest that as a precaution, that can be a screening.
Okay, sebab kalau dalam keadaan di mana ibu hamil pada peringkat umur yang lebih berusia, which is above 30 or 35?
Above 30 or 35. I think 35 has been
digalakkan buat screening kan. Dan kalau tak silap saya, selain daripada the amniocentesis that you mentioned, there are blood tests now also. Tapi this one will indicate the risiko. So if you want to know, I think to know is to be prepared.
Yes.
So we're looking at from that angle, is more supaya kita dapat bersedia untuk apa jua keadaan, and that's the reason for that.
Dan jangan khawatir, sorry to interrupt, bukan saja amniocentesis, kerana itu memang apa yang kami bilang invasive.
Ada jarum,
ada ultrasound pun.
Baru nak tanya pasal ultrasound, because nowadays kan ada 4D.
That's
So
right.
you can see a bit clearer the image of the baby, kan?
Yeah.
So sonografi dia akan tumpukan kepada bahagian leher dengan tulang belakang. Kalau tak silap
Ini
saya.
all the professional lah. Jangan khawatir. Just to be alert that early prevention is what we need to be able to access lah.
Early prevention ke early detection?
Early detection. Okay, this stage.
Yes, early detection for the purposes of early intervention.
The
Right?
knowing. So we know
Yes.
we're prepared,
Yes.
and then when we're prepared, we can start.
Yes,
Early
that's
intervention.
right.
So the acceptance comes in a lot earlier, and we are ready to go.
Yes.
So kalau kami bincangkan keadaan autism, the early screening for our families is MCHAT.
Yes.
In fact, baru-baru ni saja, the Singapore Healthcare released a video to encourage parents that has got children from 18 months boleh masuk checkkan MCHAT. In Malaysia, we need to know buku the baby book,
Pink and Blue.
Pink
Buku
and Blue
pink
baby
dan
book
buku
tu di
biru tu.
KKM memang pun sudah ada MCHAT-nya. Sama ada di public hospital, swasta, also the private clinics do also have the MCHAT, the book.
Dan buku itu boleh dibawa kepada klinik kesihatan ataupun pakar apabila mendapatkan vaksinasi.
Betul.
Untuk pakar ataupun kaki tangan klinik kesihatan tolong
Semak semula.
semak semula dan
yes.
menjawab apa-apa soalan yang ibu bapa boleh tumpukan atau tanyakan kepada mereka.
So sebenarnya parents sendirilah kan boleh ambil peranan dulu untuk mengenal pasti, untuk tengok sama ada anak-anak kita okay, right? So you can start with self, you should feel empowered to do that, don't feel lost, because lepas tu adalah next step of course untuk merujuk kepada pakar perubatan yang lebih mengetahui. Okay, so yes, so that connection, when you're talking about Down syndrome, you were speaking about the context of being able to screen, being able to also detect earlier, diagnose earlier, and therefore be better prepared. Okay, thank you SK. Desiree, I know you have something to share.
So tadi when we were talking pasal the buku biru and buku pink, I just wanted to remind everyone that baru-baru ni kita ada buat post dalam social media kami di Facebook dan Instagram. So kalau belum follow, please do. Kita Family Podcast. Ada gambar of both the books and what its purpose is basically to help and guide you through not just immunization but also like the MCHAT yang kita bincang tadi. So back to talking about Down syndrome and beberapa stereotype. So my experience dalam the world of neurodiversity memang I will admit more skewed towards autism. Tetapi ada kawan, I have many friends who have children with Down syndrome. In fact, Nori has family members, and I would like to adopt her as well.
Yes, I have a
So,
beautiful
tumpang lah.
niece who is
Tumpang.
many things, and one of them is Down syndrome lah.
Yes, yes. And I think to me, kalau nak tengok dari segi stereotype, one of the biggest ones that I rasa sometimes a bit sakit hati bila dengar lah, bila orang cakap pasal Down syndrome ni, is that all adults pun dengan Down syndrome are very childlike when it's not, that's not the case. Kan? And I think it's very important kita kena treat people with dignity, treat them at their age, kan? So we assume competence, macam kakak SK always tells us, assume competence. Jangan just because someone has Down syndrome, we assume that although they are 16 years old, then we go like, hi, how are you? You know, they may not like it. So, you know, that's one of the stereotypes that I'm hoping we can highlight about Down syndrome.
Yeah, I think basically, so to me the most important thing is kalau kita boleh ingat stereotype ni adalah satu tanggapan umum yang biasanya negatif tentang sesuatu kumpulan atau kelompok yang ada, yang wujud disebabkan budaya, disebabkan apa-apalah kepercayaan yang wujud di masyarakat, right? But stereotype ni kita tahu satu negatif, yang keduanya tak berdasarkan fakta. So tapi dalam wujud berapa lama, so kita memang kalau kita nak merujuk balik kepada tema WDSD, end the stereotypes. Kita nak tamatkan stereotype ni memang sesuatu yang elok, and for me is we should end the stereotypes on all neurodivergence, on developmental conditions, intellectual ni semua. Memang kita nak orang lenyapkanlah stereotype ni. Takkan ada stereotype ni, because the main point is to remember a person is a person. Kan kita nak tengok pada ciri-ciri kemanusiaan ni dulu. Ni adalah seorang individu. So jadi kalau apa maknanya dari segi individu pun kita tahu ni adalah seorang yang mempunyai karakter dia sendiri, preferences dia sendiri, rupa dia pun akan berbeza, dan kepulihan keupayaan dia pun sudah tentu akan berbeza. So sama ada kita sebut Down syndrome ke, kita nak sebut autism, ataupun just look at us here today. Siapa-siapalah, kalau namanya manusia tu maknanya dia adalah seorang yang individu. Dia tidak sama dengan orang yang lain. So I think memang betul kita kalau boleh apa-apalah andaian dengan stereotype tu, because to be fair akan ada mungkin yang wujud di budaya-budaya tertentu antara masyarakat-masyarakat tertentu, kan? So kalau ada, I think we like to encourage people to self-check. Check balik. Nak semak, betul ke kita pernah dengar sebagai contoh, all Down syndrome people have certain medical conditions and things like that. So mungkin akan ada, tapi berbeza. So if ada pun, maybe for one person it has something to do with eyesight. Kalau untuk seorang lagi mungkin adalah permasalahan dengan kondisi jantung. Tetapi tak semua.
Betul.
Exactly. And I think that one dari segi, to me, I'm glad you brought up that point about the like sort of macam the behaviour and cara diorang watak, present watak sendiri, all that kind of thing. Because it's always like that, right? You think so sweet, and itu kononnya macam kita nak compensate. Kita tahu rupa dia agak berbeza sebab ada ciri-ciri fizikal. So then the tendency is like, okay lah, bolehlah kita andaikan dia ni macam cute or whatever. But kita tak tahu kalau orang tu suka untuk dianggap sebagai so cute or so baby, so childlike, so innocent. So that's that's good.
Tapi Nori, boleh tak cerita sikit kepada pendengar yang mungkin tak tahu apakah ciri-ciri fizikal yang memang tipikal untuk seseorang yang mempunyai Down syndrome?
Yang lebih tipikal.
Yang lebih
selalunya kita akan lihat kepada mata. Ni antara yang kita dapat lihat daripada lahir lah, and then di belakang tengkuk ni akan ada some extra I don't know, is it a bit like a skin or flesh? It's a bit thicker. Basically it's just a little bit thicker. And then you look at the feet, feet and hands. Feet tu kadang-kadang, but it's also difficult, like sort of as a baby. And to be honest with you, I have to be very honest, I don't also remember what the
I think one
sheet
satu
is and
ciri
things like that. But usually kalau untuk pada muka memang iras wajah kita akan lihat kepada mata. So the position of the eyes is a little bit different, and that is one of the main indicator lah yang kita dah tahu that mungkin anak ni tidak typical dan mungkin akan mempunyai permasalahan yang berkaitan lah dengan it's a genetic condition, right? Yeah.
So like Puan Nori bincang tadi,
You Puan to me, kakak. Dr. Choi. Yeah, Dr. Choi.
like Nori mentioned tadi, ciri di face lah ya. Mungkin the nose bridge tu is a bit flatter.
I see.
Okay.
And kadang-kadangnya the tongue may be a little bit more thick.
Yes, thick or longer, right? Yes.
In other words, ini semua ciri-ciri physical, Tapi I just want to revisit a little bit this, genetic situation. If I look at each one of us and we do our genetic test, memang gene saya sama Nori, sama Desiree and Anit and Nick Didi. Semua
yes, Didi's
sama.
not here.
Quite
Hi,
unique,
Didi.
Tapi kami ada satu ciri yang sama. Kami semua kaum Malaysia, bangsa Malaysia. So
yes,
kelahiran
that's why we're
Malaysia.
together.
So what this leads, apa yang I like to share is this. We are all here advocate to recognize difference. Tapi kalau I wear a little bit my professional hat, memang ciri-ciri yang perlu di express in medical term sebenarnya sangat penting. Why? Because it also help the medical professional and other professional be prepared.
Yes.
Kalau sudah screen that there is a chance or a likelihood that there's a diagnosis of Down syndrome in this situation, we are all prepared to provide medical and therapeutic intervention from the time the child is born.
Yeah, immediately.
So,
My niece started therapy, and her amazing mother just started bringing her to things. Habis pantang aja, that's it. It's just
Exactly.
so many things started, and she finished sekolah menengah. She's got a job now. So
So my point there is we need to embrace the strength base in this show in Kita Family. We always want to talk about neurodiversity or diversity of individual. Tapi there is also a role to have a diagnostic view from a medical management viewpoint.
no, that's true.
So we gabungkan lah, and that will get the best benefit for the family and the individual.
Yeah, I like how you've just described it as just information. It's maklumat kan. Kita
Yes.
perlu
Awareness.
tahu supaya kita dapat menangani lah apa yang ada.
Then we appreciate.
Yes, that's
Then
right. And we
we can-
appreciate. Betul.
Dari appreciation, we understand, and then we can do the action.
That's right.
all
So that is all at a
preparedness.
very personal level, kan? And again, just to remind everybody, that's what the purpose is for.
Yes.
Not for not to be stigmatized, not to have judgment. Bukanlah dalam keadaan tu tiba-tiba kita rasa macam tiba-tiba dah tak ada harapan ataupun ini adalah suatu keadaan yang begitu-begitu, yang tak dapat diterima sebagai contoh. So it's different. It's aspek dia lain. So I think maybe Anit, boleh tak tell us kenapa, apa sebenarnya masalah dengan bahayanya stereotip ni? Kenapa sebenarnya kita tak suka stereotip, dan apakah sebab kita patut why end the stereotypes? Give us your understanding of tema dengan kempen pada tahun ini untuk tamatkan stereotip yang wujud tentang mereka yang ada Down syndrome, dan of course generally for us termasuk juga mereka semua yang neurodivergent.
Okay, pada saya, bila saya sedang membesar dan sebahagian daripada aktiviti yang saya dan adik-beradik saya buat adalah pergi swimming. Dan masa kami pergi swimming classes tu, memang ada seorang yang mempunyai sindrom Down. And kami telah mula bercakap pasal topik ini semasa berbincang dengan mendiang ibu bapa saya. Dan mereka pada masa itu ada satu pendapat yang jangan kacau orang yang mempunyai sindrom Down sebab mereka cepat marah. So that was a stereotype that I was told about.
Right.
Right, that mereka cepat marah. Tapi semakin
So leave
saya...
them alone lah.
Yeah.
Also is another thing, right? Satu dia cepat marah, but it's like leave them alone. Jangan berinteraksi lah, jangan kacau.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tapi bila saya berjumpa dengan lebih ramai orang yang mempunyai sindrom Down, termasuk Aisyah, saya mendapati bahawa bukannya mereka cepat marah, tapi cara orang bertutur dengan mereka dan bercakap dengan mereka boleh menjadikan mereka marah kerana stereotype itu memang menjadi sangat-sangat jelas kepada mereka dan menjadi obvious. So kita perlu berhentikan benda itu sebab niat kita, seperti Desiree selalu cakap, in the end it comes down to your intention. Kalau niat kita tu memang untuk berinteraksi secara ikhlas, sesiapa itu memang akan tahu.
Boleh rasa keikhlasan, betul.
Ya, tapi kalau niat mereka untuk menjadi kepoci, kan Malaysians quite kepoci.
Yes, betul.
Ya, dan kalau nak jadi kepoci tu, kenapa hidung you macam tu? So with your eyes can you see? So kalau soalan-soalan macam tu memang akan jadikan sesiapa pun menjadi marah.
Yes, anybody will get mad.
Menjadi marah.
Right?
So memang orang yang mempunyai sindrom Down tu bukannya cepat marah, tetapi sebab mereka berlainan sedikit daripada orang yang neurotypical, kita boleh bagi mereka peluang untuk integrasi jika kita just let them be dan treat them as another human. So menjadi inklusif adalah sangat penting, dan untuk tamatkan stereotype itu adalah teramat-amat penting.
So if you really look at it, explanation and contoh dari Anit ni, bukannya mereka cepat marah, tapi kita yang membuat mereka marah.
Persepsi kami,
Kan?
persepsi kami.
Kita
We
trigger.
are the trigger. So maybe check ourselves dulu, kan, sebelum nak bercakap or want to do anything, check ourselves. And again, I always say niat. Kalau niat kita ikhlas, it comes off, and the person on the receiving end will understand our niat and our intention.
On that note, let's take a break. Hi, we're back. Episod ke-8. Pada segmen pertama tadi, kita telah membincangkan World Down Syndrome Day dan menyebut sedikit tentang tema WDSD pada tahun ini, iaitu And the Stereotypes. So I think just to finish off that discussion, maybe Anit, would you like to sum up what are our hopes and mengapa pada setiap tahun kita mahu meningkatkan kesedaran tentang adanya condition seperti ini, and then we'll do a little jump and bridge across to speak about sesuatu benda yang ada berkaitan, yang berlaku dari segi tanggapan to neurodivergence dan dari segi bagaimana kita berinteraksi dengan mereka yang neurodivergent. So I'll head over to you.
Okay, kami berlima selalu inginkan Malaysia menjadi lebih inklusif, dan setiap orang yang neurodivergent ataupun yang mempunyai apa-apa sindrom yang berkaitan dengan neurodiversity berasa mereka boleh menjadi sebahagian daripada masyarakat Malaysia. Mereka boleh berkhidmat untuk memajukan Malaysia, untuk make Malaysia a better place. We are truly Asia, we are diverse, and we can be diverse even with the inclusion of those who are neurodivergent. So let's do that. And whether they are Down syndrome, whether they are autistic, whether they are dyslexic, whatever they have, or whether they have physical disabilities, I'm sure they have something to contribute to making Malaysia a better place, whether it is in the workforce, or whether it is at school, or whether it's just speaking up.
Yeah, every person has value. Kehadiran tu sudah
Yes.
banyak, sudah membawa makna yang begitu besar sebenarnya. You know, you don't need to specifically bring in something to the table. You know, your presence is already very meaningful. So that's why kita nak semua orang terlibat, kan? Okay, so today we wanted to talk about how people look at people who are neurodivergent. And when I say look, memang pandang, melihat, tengok. So we want to talk a little bit about staring and looking. Is it okay? I mean, it's a little bit part of our culture, kan? Not just Malaysians, but quite a few other countries in Asia tu pun kita ni jenis yang suka pandang pada orang. The kepoci thing.
Kami stop dekat traffic accident tu kan.
Oh, yes.
Jenguk sikit, slow down.
Yes. We like to look. You know, so on the one hand, okay, we understand. Ada this aspect of budaya and maybe it's not so bad, but maybe it's not good either. Like we were talking about stereotypes. Stereotype ni kadang-kadang pun datang daripada budaya juga. Adakah ia sesuatu yang positif? Bolehkah kita macam terima saja is okay? Adakah kita perlu beritahu anak-anak kita ataupun mereka yang neurodivergent? No, you have to put up with this. Terima je lah. Okay? Sebab orang memang macam ni. So we want to talk about the topic of staring and looking. Is it okay? Is it not okay? Yeah. And sebenarnya, what should we be doing about it? Desiree, I want you to start.
Ooh, I'm in the hot seat. So I'm going to quote Didi yang tak dapat bersama kami hari ni. So what we are talking about is to stare or not to stare.
Yeah, that is the question.
That is the question today. And to backtrack a little bit away from the neurodivergent part, look at me kan, memang rupa pun berbeza. Polis stop saya pun minta pasport, tak minta IC, you know. So it's been a lifelong thing that memang ni I have always been the one that's different lah. So masa kecil I grew up in Seremban. Kan membesar di Seremban.
I challenge you a bit. Sama lah ya. Faham.
Thing, you know, it was a bit hard to get that dari kawan-kawan dekat sekolah sebab kan Desiree ni berbeza.
Tak geng.
Tak ramai geng dengan Desiree because they're like, Mat Saleh, and it wasn't even in a way that, you know, people assume kan, oh, very putih, very cantik is something so good. Tapi what I experienced as a child was more shame kan. So I felt a lot of shame that they're like, Mat Saleh. Tapi when as an adult now, I don't feel that kanak-kanak tu that made fun of me, they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Kan, and that we are discussing now is memang budaya kita, something yang tak sama dengan kami akan lihat, kami akan tengok. I've been guilty of that before. Masa traffic jam ada accident, saya akan jenguk to see what happened. Curious or kepo, that one, that is the question, right? But you know, to sum it up, I rasa yes, it's part of our budaya culture, and when staring, maybe again, I'm going to repeat, check ourselves. Apakah niat kami when we are staring? For example, I've been in situations bila anak saya meltdown in shopping centres. I pegang, you know, bag of my grocery semua. I just, you know, put it on the floor. I duduk atas lantai with my child, and a lot of people are staring. Kan? Tapi in that moment, for me, sebab maybe because I have a bit of thick skin, memang I tak kisah orang pandang and stare, but you can feel it. Kan, you can feel the stares in some cases, the judgment. And the meltdowns aside, okay, that maybe is a granted lah a situation because there's noise and whatnot, right? People can't help but stare. Tapi on the other end of the spectrum, my son steams a lot in public, so flapping and spinning and
itu cara biasa-biasa lah. Bukan
Dengan
meltdown,
bubble.
itu
Bukan
dia
meltdown.
keluar, Hans keluar je jalan-jalan
Yes.
sama mak.
Exactly. So for me, it's like I've never felt a need to tell him, Hans jangan, orang pandang. For me, it's like, tak apalah, dia tak ganggu orang. He's not harming himself. He's not harming somebody else. So I'm in my own world lah, just going about. He's there steaming, running up and down or whatever. But I have gotten stares. People sort of expect me to stop him or keep him in check. So
okay.
that one sometimes on a good day memang lah Desiree tak kisah. But there are days where memang I terasa like, why does it have to be that way? Kan steams are not, it's not wrong lah. And
So
like
what do you feel, Desiree? Do you feel that when they are staring at you, mereka expect kenapa dia tak jaga anak dia ke, kenapa dia tak control anak dia. What is your perception when you get those stares?
Initially, it was more that I felt judged, right? People are judging me as a parent, like, ni ibu macam mana ni, dia tak kisah pun anak dia buat macam ni, dia buat bodoh, dia buat tak tahu. Sorry, I used the B word on air. but yeah, so that was initially when I first felt that. But now, when I still get that stare, I rasa sedih. I feel a little bit sad because memang awareness dan kesedaran dah lebih in the last, I've been on this journey for 7 years lah kan.
Dah meningkat lah. So tak sama seperti pada permulaannya. Tetapi
rasa, so the feeling has changed from like the skin pun dah tebal lagi lah. After 7 years the thickness has increased. So the perasaan now more is like sedih. Like why do they need to judge me and my child? We're not hurting anyone. So next time you see someone steam, it's okay. You want to look, is fine. Tapi check yourself for your niat lah. Kenapa? Why are you staring?
And jangan jump to conclusion lah. Jangan cepat sangat kita buat andaian yang negatif. Terus-terus je kita ingat macam, apa kena dengan mak ni?
Stereotype.
Like the bad parenting. The stereotype. That's right.
Sebenarnya, maybe we can also look from the lens of the person that is staring. Apakah dia khawatir ke? Dia heran ke? Ataupun mungkin dia takut sikit?
Yes,
Could be.
takut.
Or
Yes,
would
yeah,
that
could
be
be,
an
could be.
opportunity?
Okay.
I know there's a lot to be handling during, we always use this word, either meltdown lah, tantrum, yeah? But perhaps we can just say, we are okay. Yeah? I think during that situation memang susah kan kalau anak is having a
terlantar dekat bawah tu.
and ibu pun
Kulit-kulit.
sebenarnya ibu bapa
Kita pun
family,
cemas.
rasa cemas
Yes.
kan, tapi mungkin yang hairan mungkin dia mau bantu then don't know how. I'm not sure.
No,
Maybe
that's true. Kita
That's
pun tak boleh andaikan semua orang bertanggapan buruk.
yeah,
Tak semua.
maybe yang curious tu, yang hairan tu, dia boleh tanyakan, can I help? Maybe.
Yep.
I wonder kan. I
No,
have
it's
a-
good that you brought it up.
I
It's
have a-
true. Jangan kita pula yang membuat jangkaan yang tidak tepat.
Betul.
Yeah.
It works both ways kan.
Yes.
Inclusion,
Both ways,
we
yes.
want it, so we have to receive.
Yeah.
I want to share a story masa anak sulung saya still a toddler tu.
Sure, anak sulung.
Sulung ke bongsu?
Aaron ke Josh?
Ni bongsu lagi. Bongsu. Okay.
Every time he says anak sulung, we know it's Joshua.
Thank you, Nori. And I remember how dalam lift ni selalu terperangkap the feeling
Yes.
for mama is, alamak, segan lah anak ni berkira-kira, he counts all the numbers as we are in the lift,
Oh, the floor, is it?
the floor.
As we're going
And of
up.
course, Joshua suka nombor,
I see.
but he doesn't stop counting kan. So what I learned to calm mama down is I started to count with Joshua,
Okay.
and it's like a play kan. And actually what I found is then Joshua also seemed to feel calm. That means somebody is playing with me. Memang that is for them maybe not just calming, but it is actually feeling of a nice feeling of play. Kan?
And a connection, right?
It's a
Joining
connection.
in.
Memang
Joining
any
in.
connection.
Let's
So
do this
maybe
together.
We can try that for any parent. Maybe even if you are in the lift, if you are just a stranger in the lift, try counting together kan.
I have a
Just an
story
example.
like that too because when Nirav was much younger, he used to stim and verbal stim, and it was an oral one.
Yep.
And I never realized I did that, but all I wanted to do was enter his world,
Right.
Because I knew
Connect lah.
Yes.
he was somewhere,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? And the teacher actually pointed it out to me and said, I learned something from you. I said, what? That every time Nirav starts stimming, you engage him in conversation and you say, oh, so what happened next? And you almost make it like it's normal, that he will then snap out of it because half the time they don't realize they're stimming because it's a self-regulation to calm themselves down,
Yes,
and then they
that's
come
natural.
back out to your world
it's
and
natural.
start having a conversation. So mungkin cara mencelah semasa mereka membuat aktiviti steaming ini
dan
adalah
kita risau orang pandang.
kita rasa
So
kita
cara
boleh
untuk kita respon.
sebagai menjadikannya satu pertuturan dua hala.
Betul. So dalam itu sebenarnya it's the penjaga, the ibu, the pengasuh, that has a conversation. The anxiety yang kami segan lah, malu ke, is natural become a conversation. Yeah, that is what we call self engagement dengan anak kami lah. Yeah. But with this, something pop into my mind actually.
Silakan.
You know, we've been talking about ciri-ciri Down syndrome, anak Down syndrome, individual Down syndrome. Kami akan dapat nampak yang obvious, tapi ada word ni, term ni, hidden disability. Yang tak ketara, mungkin tersembunyi. Anak-anak autism kami actually nampaknya semua typical je. Macam you, macam I.
Macam biasa je.
Biasa, memang biasa. So, kerana itu, mungkin the people around us susah nak understand kan. Kenapa?
Susah nak faham.
Susah nak faham. Kenapa orang ni jahat? Betul.
Nakal.
Because not obvious. Kan? Tak obvious kami tak ada dalam wheelchair ke. Tak ada sign-sign yang kami tahu anak atau orang ni
mempunyai ketidakupayaan,
mempunyai ketidakupayaan yang berlainan. So that hidden disability memang mencabari daily life dari anak-anak sampai dewasa.
And I think what's interesting also is hidden disability ni adalah kategori OKU yang kategori OKU juga yang mengerangkumi beberapa condition atau diagnosis termasuk autism, ADHD, dyslexia, ada quite a few
sebenarnya
actually.
Historically digunakan untuk orang yang ada isu mental health sebenarnya.
Kesihatan mental.
Kerana kalau you early depression mungkin tak dapat nampak ciri-cirinya. Betul? Atau kadang-kadang kalau you anxious stress, sebelum sampai tahap yang sangat tinggi tu, everybody try to be typical kan? Betul? So hidden disability ni dulu-dulunya memang dirujukkan untuk mental health.
Termasuk dyslexia.
Yes. Sekarang ni we are more aware. All hidden disability dalam neurodiversity-nya memang you cannot see the obvious.
Yeah, there are so many, right? But it's so interesting. It has to be pointed out, that term, sebab when you mention the term disability, sokongan diperlukan, right? Accommodation is needed.
Correct.
It's there. So it goes back to macam SK sebut masa segmen pertama tadi kan, kita nak faham juga apakah perkara-perkara yang kita tahu tentang seorang individu yang OKU atau neurodivergent, ciri-ciri yang membuatkan mereka berbeza dengan orang yang lain, sebab kerap kali ciri-ciri ini adalah benda yang memerlukan kita memahami, memerlukan kita memberi sokongan, bantuan yang tertentu, so it's understanding that. And it's true, kalau fizikal kita nampak, senang sikit kita nak faham dan kita faham macam mana nak bantu orang. Sebagai contoh yang tak boleh berjalan dan menggunakan kerusi roda, kita tahu kerusi roda tu yang memerlukan akses. But it's quite tricky with hidden disability. Bila sesuatu tu tak nampak dan tak jelas, tersembunyi, bagaimana kita nak bantu dia? Sebab kita pun tak pasti. Tapi
that might
kadang-kadang
contribute to staring.
Correct. It will still contribute to staring because orang yang mempunyai hidden disability, tingkah laku dia, kan, pergerakan dia, perangai maybe to some degree,
selalunya behavior kan?
akan dia akan menunjukkan benda-benda juga yang macam tak biasa lah, yang not typical lah. Ini pun will invite the staring and things like that. So it's a bit ironic, right? But it's also interesting. There's so many aspects to, kalau kita sebut tentang menerima kepelbagaian di antara kita, actually kita kena mengenali banyak aspek.
Betul.
We've got to know about many types of different people. This world is super extra colourful when we talk about keupayaan, right?
It's like now ada term tribe. Actually sebenarnya kalau kami accept this as ni tribe yang dia punya perangai macam ni, then maybe we won't have this perangai yang tak betul.
Yes.
Betul?
Yes,
Yeah.
betul.
This is a neurodiverse tribe.
Yeah,
Memang
Neurotribes is a book, I think.
Yeah.
Neurotribes was a
Good one.
book.
So if you look on the flip side, we want acceptance, penerimaan.
Yes.
Maknanya, so for someone like me, saya kena terimalah the staring. Juga, kan? Because if we want to ask for it, we also have to give it.
Yes.
Kan? Because
But to learn to be brave enough to respond to it, and also kita mengharapkan the staring that we get is more just curiosity lah, not judgment.
kita
kan?
anggap is curiosity so that kita tak, we don't react in an extreme way.
Yeah.
Okay, would you say it's because they've never encountered it? Sebab katalah bila kita pergi
Tempat baru.
and then
Memang.
kita nampak landmark, katalah Eiffel Tower, terus wah, and we stare.
Yes, yeah, of
right?
course.
And then KLCC as well, we're like, wow. And
But that's why it goes back to niat.
Yes.
Niat dan keikhlasan. Yang tu because you kagum. But you're not feeling something negative. But the problem is, and kenapa kita menyebut ni, and why we really are missing Didi, because I think the first suggestion about this topic memang datang daripada Didi. Dia nak kita mengupas topik ini sebab kita faham that ini perkara lazim. Dan kita semua antara diri kita pun mengaku kita kadang-kadang yang the one yang staring kan. Tapi how can that why does that even matter? How does that impact us? And of course sometimes this staring is not good, because ini staring ni yang memandang orang, yang tengok macam ni, is like ini manifestasi kepada stereotype tu lah.
Yes.
Dan
kan
perasaan negatif.
Yes, stereotype is negative. So itu yang membuatkan keadaan di mana bila kita it's not just like just melihat ni very neutral kan. Benda tu dah jadi jeling. That is not neutral anymore.
Yes, that's definitely not neutral. Jeling, the intention is very clear.
Yes, it's
But I'm
very
hopeful,
clear.
Saya orang yang sangat hopeful, harapan yang tinggi di kita family platform ni, di public sekarang. Kalau kami bincang-bincang, we have more awareness, I believe the stereotype the gapnya akan reduce. Kan? Kerana kami ibu-ibu, as parents, as keluarga, nilai kami, our family values is to love, sayangkan perbezaan, each and every one of us, even in our own family kan. Betul tak? So I'm hopeful.
Yes.
I am too, sebab ada orang yang dah berumur, mereka terus mendapat neurodiversity dalam keuzuran mereka.
Betul.
Then
Absolutely.
so that is also evolution.
Interesting.
And some of the people with early intervention actually come out of it. And then ada orang yang memang stare sebab kagum, orang yang sepatutnya tak boleh melakukan some of the
andaian
things yang
kita,
andaian mereka. This one pasti tak boleh. Lepas tu melukis macam tu, detail macam tu. So that is a different type of kagum. But they would also stare like, huh? This is something I didn't expect of this person.
So beranikanlah kami sendiri.
Yes.
Be bold,
Yes.
Be bold, exactly. And thank you for the reminder on being hopeful.
Thank
You can always count on our kakak to remind us.
Yes.
That's
hope.
right.
To be positive
Yeah.
and to keep making changes.
Okay.
Kita family.
The family, yes.
Yeah, so start with family, everybody. Yakinkan diri. Yakini bahawa kita boleh membawa perubahan yang baik. beranikan diri untuk menangani satu situasi yang kita hadapi dan sama-samalah kita juga mengingati antara kita. So thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.